Warning! The podcast you're about to hear is purely for entertainment purposes. The content shared is not a form of advice, and applying any of the information in real life is done solely at your own risk. The individuals featured in this episode take no responsibility for the consequences of using these materials in practice. If that's a problem for you, feel free to skip it, although you'll probably regret it.
This podcast is created for you and thanks to you. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do leave the comment and share this episode for bumping up the algorithm. If you found something valuable for you here and you wanted to support me and this channel while also needing the highest quality peptides and supplements, maybe an awesome sports bag, or just simply wanted to fuel your mind with some good nootropic coffee, please support me by using my discount codes. The links and the codes you can find in the description down below. I also highly encourage you to check out my shop for awesome t-shirts like this, some shakers like this, and for awesome wristbands. Thank you for watching, and let's get back to the content.
Hello everyone, and welcome in another English One podcast. Today's guest is Kyle Wilkes. Hello, sir.
Hello, sir. How are you?
I'm really fine. I have a question because your Instagram handle says Sir Kyle Wilkes. Is that Sir something like, I don't know? I know that you have like a Polish roots, and we have like a noble categories in our country like back in the days. So maybe that's just like your roots or something.
I wish I could say it was. I have a very Polish background, starting with my grandfather and my father, but no. You know, the sir came more so from some of the YouTube celebrities and athletes that I work with. They just referred to me as sir as a sign of respect, and it kind of picked up traction to where other people would say, "Hey, sir, can I ask you a question?" And you know, it kind of just caught on. So I kind of played with it, and you know, sometimes there are some that get a little offended, and I'm just like, "Hey, man, like this is just like a nickname. It's nothing personal. Like if I hurt your feelings or something, by all means, I don't mean it as anything other than a sign of respect or something like that, you know?"
That's fine. It's because just judging from the Unrock podcast, you're like 22, 24 years old, something like that.
No, I'm in my 30s now. So I'm not. I used to be younger.
I know, but you always like to cover your age, so I would just want to be.
It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah. Okay. So, my podcasts are a little bit different. I like to just call it that way, just because it's more based on a situation. Like I've created a scenario for you, and we're gonna try to talk in that lane. But obviously, it's not always possible, just because the scenario is just it's an example, but you would need to probably work with me for at least like 2 months to even grasp on what you really wanted to change or make with my my situation. Let's say that today we're gonna obviously talk about the off season, because I like to just cut it in the off season and then like transition into a prep, maybe peak week. So if you find time for the second part in the future, I'll be really appreciate that. But let's talk about the off season today. Let's say that I am your new clients of yours. And okay. I'm weighing about 102 kilos, so it's probably like 225, 6, something like that. Less than 230. And I like to go, like jump over the weight class, just basically be an open bodybuilder, probably in the next 2 years or so. Or even next year, maybe just just like a bottom of the class or something like that. So let's say that my blood works like coming from my last previous season of competing. I've done something like a health phase or whatever, and my joints are healthy, my blood works. You are just happy with that. What would be like a starting point from that? What's the questions you'll be asked, and what's the information you would like to get out of me first at the beginning of our cooperation?
Yeah. So kind of how my onboarding would be. there's a short intake form that I have that people fill out that kind of says a little bit about who they are. And then I jump on a call. Some people call it like a consult call. I look at it as more of, I want to get an understanding of what it is you're looking for. So if I can genuinely help you, awesome. If there's someone on my team or someone that comes to mind that would better serve what you're looking for, then I can push you in that direction. So being that you kind of preface this with, hey, I am trying to compete again, I'm around 100 kilos, you said, right? About 220 pounds, trying to push into the open class. This is my lab work. I would make sure it's extensive lab work first and foremost. A lot of people just give me like a comprehensive wellness panel, the basics. And I'm just like, hey, especially for someone in your shoes that is looking to really go all in and do the people want to take higher dosages sometimes and really push themselves to the limit. I like to have a baseline. I'll say, okay, depending on the age of the individual, the extent of their history in terms of how long they've been taking gear, things of that nature. I'll ask them family history. Is there any type of hereditary things we need to look out for? Some people have, thysemia traits to where maybe the RBCs are always a bit higher. So I know in my head, okay, something like equipoise is already out. So I try to understand what that person's been doing to get them to where they are today. So let's just say in your case, 220 pounds, I think is a good amount of muscle, unless you said you were like 6'6", or I don't know what the conversion is for
I'm
centimeters.
5'7".
Okay, right. So I think that you're already a heavily muscled individual. So I'd say, okay, let's see what you've been doing. So that starts with what you've been doing, training, nutrition, right? So let me see what your diet looks like. For some people, they have a style of where they eat the same thing every day. And the days that they go to the gym, maybe they have like an intra-shake or something like that. Some people prefer to have high protein diets, low fat diets, right, with high carbs or something like that. So I would just generally try to get an understanding of what it is you've been doing that you're coming to me with, because the last thing I'm going to do for most people, I don't overhaul someone's plan if they're in a good spot. I just say, okay, these are the things that I like. This is the direction we're going to go, and we're going to see if things work, right? Now, if someone comes to me and they're a total beginner, I look at that as more, okay, I can kind of groom them how I want to groom them. But usually if someone is more experienced, you had to have been doing something right to get to where you are. Because I think someone that is 5'7", over 100 kilos, they're probably going to have some good size on them, good tissue on them, assuming you're not 25% body fat, right? So when we assess what the person's eating, coupled with how they look, coupled with their extensive history from a lab work standpoint and what pharmaceuticals were in play, I say, okay, these are the things that are going to start to check my boxes and where we can start. And then the most important of them all, in my opinion, the training aspect, I'll say, okay, let's just say, for hypothetically speaking, your lower body wasn't up to par and you're trying to move into the open class, right? I would say, okay, obviously I know we're going to probably have to dial in our training a little bit more on the lower half, especially if the person comes to me and says, hey, I've been training really hard. I do legs 2 or 3 times a week. They just don't grow. To me, if you have muscle in other areas of your body, let's just say your chest and back are great, you can put on muscle genetically. You're just probably not connecting something you're doing execution-wise with your leg training, I think is impaired. Now, many people, I use legs as an example because they skip legs. They just train them once every 2 weeks, or they don't exert themselves. So that's where I get an understanding of, okay, how you do one thing is usually how you do many things. So gathering all that information, I ask people more so about their past in terms of, again, I have some advanced clients that are Olympia level, as you probably realized over recent years.
Yeah.
And then I have a lot of people that come to me that, hey, I just got into the gym. I saw so-and-so that you coach. I'd like to be like that. And I say, okay, these are the basics that we have to start with. You don't have to run before you're walking, crawl before you walk, walk before you jog, jog before you run type thing, right? So in a long-winded answer, those are the things I'll check with. And I'll say, okay, this individual is coming to me. What have they been doing? And based on that, is there something that I despise, I don't like, I don't stand for? If that's not the case, I say, okay, let's start to work with this here.
Okay, so let's just reinvent the wheel for each and every one of those categories. So it's going to be training first, then probably diet and PEDS and etc. So, but first of all, before I ask those questions, I have to selfishly ask, because I was always curious about that. If you're okay with talking about the like more like a business stuff, because
Mhm.
you've told like if you're not able to help me, or you just think that maybe I'm not the best fit for you, that you will put me in a direction of one of your teammates. And I would really love to know how those teams are working, like in those coaching fields, because this was like the biggest, probably the most known team is obviously the Camp Jensen team. It's like the biggest team
Yeah.
out there bodybuilding wise. So I was always wondering how it really works, because if it's just like you were just sharing the knowledge, or you like the captain of the ship, and they are maybe like you under your jurisdiction, or maybe you just taking some profit out of their payments, or
Mhm.
you know what I'm going to, yes, because I
Yeah.
was always wondering about that, if that's okay with you to speak about.
Absolutely. More than okay. Like I said, I'm an open book. When you ask something, I'll start to dive in. And if I dive too far, just pull me back and say, hey, enough. Um, Great question. So the coaching teams is interesting. And I say that because there's a lot of ethical ways to go about things from a business standpoint, and there's a lot of unethical ways to go about it. Now, the right way to do things, you get to a point, and I'm grateful I've got to that point where I'm at my limit in terms of who I can work with. The only thing I can do is I could raise my premium and the rate I would charge. That way, hopefully, I get less people. But ironically, usually I just get more serious people that are like, okay, I'll pay for that as long as the quality is there. But eventually, you get to a point where you say, okay, if I work with any more people, I'm going to water down my product. I'm not going to be able to pay attention. I'm going to have misses, and I'm not delivering the quality, and I'm not meeting the expectations because, again, not to go back to your first question, but me understanding what your goal is really important to me, because if I can't get behind your goal and I don't see the vision, I don't know how to guide you to it. And worse, if I want your goal more than you do, I can't get behind that. That frustrates me because I haven't yet found a way, and maybe 5, 10 years from now, I will. I haven't found a way to do the work for people, because as a coach, I can lay the blueprint and I could say, hey, these are the things I'd like you to do. And I can be very specific because I'm very granular with how I do things and meticulous about, hey, this is why I want you to do it. So you understand, you can have more intent behind what you're doing. But at the end of the day, I can't make you do it, you know? But as far as coaching, going back to that business side of things, I about 2 years ago now, I brought my first, I guess you could say, apprentice under me. His name is Nicholas Piambino. He was an athlete under mine for many years. And essentially, the reason I did that, and I was very careful about who I was choosing, was because sometimes you get a coach that's been doing this for a while, and they're kind of, you know how bodybuilders can be, a little stubborn and stuck in their ways. And for me, I want someone that is open to understanding that no matter how good you are, you can be better. You could always learn something. Every day that you have an opportunity to wake up, that's a blessing in itself. What can you learn? And how can you impact someone that perhaps you've never even met? And my goal coaching is to have the impact on as most people as possible. And that's why I realized, okay, despite working with a great amount of clients over the years, you have now social media and YouTube and Instagram, TikTok, so many platforms, right? Where people can kind of see bits and pieces, and maybe they don't have the financial support and backing to pay for coaching. And I want them to not get into the hands of the wrong people that are going to ultimately lower that ceiling or give them a bad taste in their mouth in terms of what coaching is about and why bodybuilding isn't good or anything like that, right? And there's a negative stigma when it comes behind PEDs and stuff like that. So my goal was, okay, how can I get someone under me that I can groom, that isn't stubborn? And Nicholas was a very intelligent person. And I said, okay, I'm going to help you get some clients. And ultimately for me, when I have my consult calls with many people, especially my young athletes, I know the rate I'm going to tell them they're not going to be able to afford. So the next best thing is pushing them to you, to where financially I'll get a cut of that, but more so because that individual perhaps is in advance and I know they're going to have a lot of questions because I encourage questions. He's going to have the time to hold their hand and walk them through that process. Whereas me, if I have somebody competing at the Olympia that's taking my attention, I can't answer those little questions, right? And I don't want to ever make someone feel. The one thing that always bothers me is when someone says, "Hey, Coach Kyle, I don't want to bother you. I know you're busy." Bother me. You're paying me. Ask me the questions, because when I was an athlete, still I'm an athlete. Any coach I had, I'll ask a question a lot. I don't give a shit. If I have a question, I'm going to ask it.
Yeah.
And if you don't answer, I'm going to be a little offended, because, hey, as long as the question is pertinent to the individual and not, hey, I saw my friend doing this, I think it's very important to feel like comfortable enough to ask those questions. So with Nick, and then I brought another client of mine, Gianna, under me, who has a bigger platform, so she's able to really get a lot of clients herself. I monitor what they're doing. And then anytime they have questions, hey, I'm having a client that has this digestive issue. This is what they're eating. This is their feedback. I can kind of point them down troubleshooting. I'll say, hey, this is what I would do. Let's have them do this. Check back in a day. Or if they're going through peaking or getting them ready for a prep, looking at lab work, going over all the markers that are important, what not to do, things like that. I walk them through that, and I'm giving them the skill set. And then from there, having the skill set is one thing. Being able to apply it and having the eye for bodybuilding is another. And that's one thing I don't think, it's not as teachable if someone doesn't have an eye for things, just like an artist just knows what to do, right? But when people can start to understand, okay, this is flat, this is full, this is why this person looks this way, this was their water intake, this is what we did with sodium, this is the foods they were eating. You start to have a little bit of an understanding from a nutrition standpoint of why things are working or why they're not working. So from the coaching aspect, that's why I had 2 coaches come under me, so I could start to have more of a widespread reach on people I'm impacting indirectly, because to me, though they're working with Nick or Gianna now, they are indirectly getting coached through me because I can answer questions and stuff like that. Now, where it gets a little finicky, and I'm sure you've seen it in probably, maybe not specifically in Poland, but every other part of the country that might have, with the world that might have coaches and teams, sometimes people pretend that they're coaching someone. Right. So I come to you and I say, hey, I want to work with you. And you say, okay, these are my rates. And then at the end of the day, it's not actually you that's coaching me. It's someone else pretending to be you. Right.
Yeah.
Now, because of technology and where it is today, it's not as easy to do. But I'm aware of teams that still do that, because it's very hard sometimes when you're trying to groom someone under you. A lot of the people that come to me, and I've had pushback over the years now, they're a little more understanding when I guide them. I say, hey, this person, Nick, is going to be able to help you reach your goal. They're more trusting in it, because eventually you start to build testimonials and have great feedback from other athletes that person worked with. So you can trust the process, because you now see you're not the first guinea pig or something like that, right? But, and a long-winded answer, normally how coaching should work, you have the person at the top of the pyramid, and that person is pulling back on their current clients. And then therefore, instead of me spending my Thursday going through 25 to 30 check-ins, I only have 5. And then I have a meeting with each coach under me where I can go through any questions that they have, maybe from the last few days or from that specific day, and help them coach their clients. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So it's basically a mentoring system, something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. So did you get paid for those like times when when they are consulting with you, or is like a monthly salary or something like that?
Oh, perfect question. So usually it's a monthly salary of some sort. So let's just say
Okay.
the person is a referral from me. I'll take a higher percentage. Otherwise, if Nick or Gianna or someone gets their clients on their own, then I take a very smaller percentage just to be part of the team, and more so for those calls that we would have where we go through questions. Does that make sense?
Yeah, great,
Yeah.
great. Yeah, that was always something that I just can't comprehend on, because I was always curious how it's really works. So it's
Yeah.
basically like a mentoring system. It's really great. I know like Dom Kuza is doing something like similar
Yep.
through his like websites, and I've like recently doing something similar with Don Mutasio. So it's
Awesome. Oh,
maybe
you work with
not
Dom?
exactly. No, he was my coach previously,
Okay.
and we just talk through time to times, like more like a chit chat. Sometimes he just asks what's up, or I ask him. And recently, I've just started to just meeting with him like every other time if I have some questions or just wanted
Gotcha.
to clarify something. And I do believe as he's a really smart guy, and even though it wasn't the suit for me, I still think that he is a great coach. But yeah, so let's get back to the question. So starting with the training, let's just like previously I've always worked like those English styles training, like Dorian Yates, kind of like Mike Menzer, heavy duty, something like that, like top back off sets, like a little bit lower on the volume, high intensity. It says like maybe 14 to maximum 16 sets per session. So let's say like in a push, I will do like 4 to 5 sets on the chest, maybe like 3 to 4 on a shoulders, and maybe 2 to 4 maximum like for the triceps, and that would be my push. And basically, I came across all like a different rep schemes. So let's say it's like from 6 to 30 even for legs, because I was just like to kill myself. So let's say that was my basics, and I've done this throughout the years. But right now you can clearly see that my chest is lacking, my like arms are dominating, my shoulders like from delts are popping, but maybe I need some more work on the side delts just to like make a appearance that I am a little bit wider, because my waist is not the best these days. And what would be just starting from just similar training to that, or just restrict like trying to refer my like find my way again, let's just like that.
So let's just assume for a beginner, again, there are different ways I would go about it, because I don't think the more advanced you become in training, the longer you do it. Training is a skill, right? And I'm sure if you think back to you 10 years ago, you didn't effectively train as well as you do now. Now,
Yeah.
obviously, are you still learning, improving every day that you go into the gym? Yes, I truly believe that. And at some point, we don't, and we start going downward, right? And then we retire. But in your case, I would start with asking you, okay, what does your training split look like? Is it more frequency, right? Where maybe you're hitting a push day on a Monday, and then after 3 or 4 nights of sleep, you're hitting it again. Someone that's doing a bro split, to where on Monday it's 15 sets of chest, a few sets of biceps, right? And I'd say, okay, I try to get the understanding there. And then more importantly than that, I would want to see the execution. Now, again, I can't be in every place in the world with all my clients. I wish I could, but I can say, hey, take this device of yours and get a tripod. Try not to disturb other gym goers as you're getting my video that I want, but show me your top sets. And by top sets, your working sets. Now, do I care to see all 15 sets of chest? No. I can get a glimpse of, okay, you did a chest press. It looked like you had 3 more reps in it. You sped the reps up because I said, okay, maybe the goal was maybe we're doing like an incline Smith, and I wanted you to build up to your first set of a working weight of 10 to 12 repetitions. You sent it to me, and I noticed when you did your second set, perhaps we kept the weight the same. We weren't doing a top set, back off set, or squeeze set, as I refer to it as. We noticed that you sped the reps up. So you still got 12 reps, but you went much faster. So when you're saying week to week, hey, Kyle, I'm getting stronger, and I see week 1, you did 100 kilos for 10 reps, and it took you 50 seconds. And then in week 2, you did 104 kilos, 10 reps, in 40 seconds. To me, you're not getting stronger. You just went faster. There's something we're missing here, right? So I think establishing the baseline of what does the tempo look like? Are we doing maybe a 3-second eccentric, a slight pause, then blasting the concentric? Are we squeezing at the top? Usually for chest, I don't do that. But making sure that we set the groundwork and the foundation so that when we're moving forward, we're able to actually make progress, because that's what training is, right? We don't know how heavy something is. We just see it, and our egos of the males especially get to us. And I say, I'll look over, I see this person doing, 50 kilo presses I'm going to grab the 60s because I should be better than him, And we start to let our ego drive things as opposed to understanding that, okay, is the chest actually working? For most people, myself included, I have a bird chest. There's nothing there. My delts dominate. I was always, when I pressed when I was younger, when I would do the flat barbell, I got up to doing a good working weight, just shy of 400 pounds. So maybe 195 kilos, which is good enough to have a chest if I'm doing it correctly. For me, it still sucked. So I said, guess what? I don't need 225 kilos. I need to change the way I'm doing it, right? Let me abandon this exercise because maybe it's not helpful. So for you, I would do those two things. I would see the execution is most important because I can give you 6 different training splits every single week. But if you're not training and actually creating the stimulus that's needed, then we have a problem. Make sense?
Yeah, but let me get that a little bit clearer, because that's obviously will be figured out throughout the process. But let's say we just started, so you have to like set me on something for the start, for the get-go. So would you leave my previous training and just observe what's happened, or you've just trying to manipulate, maybe switch to a little bit higher volume, or try to find maybe a different split that in your opinion suits better, or something like that?
So in this specific hypothetical situation, how often are you training chest and what does that look like?
Let's say is push, pull, legs, rest, push, pull, because I'm focusing on my legs, on my chest, sorry. And it's mostly like it's split it throughout the chest dominant and like a little bit more shoulders, but with like a more like a type of like pumping exercises, like stretching exercises. That's like more of the isolations work in the shoulders days, and more like a pushing day on those main chest day. And I'm doing like, let's say like 60 to 70 sets per week on every muscle
Everything.
group, not
Okay.
the chest. Yeah.
So in your case, psychologically, as I try to build a repertoire with the person I'm working with, usually training should be enjoyable for many people. It might be hard training legs, whatnot, but it should be enjoyable, right? So I'd say, okay, you're doing push pull legs, off push pull. Nothing wrong foundationally with what you're saying. Should, in theory, work. Now, what I would do, the only thing I might adjust is the execution. Let's just say for some reason you're going on your push day and you're like, hey, I'm doing triceps first or doing shoulders first. I'd say, okay, let's adjust this a little bit. Let's make sure we have the exercise sequence in a way that's primed and tailored to actually facilitate growth. And then the first thing I'm doing after that, getting those videos. I want to see how you're pressing, because how you're doing one press is probably how you're doing every press. Maybe you don't have the intensity that's needed, and maybe everything is great. And then the reality of the situation is now we look into the recovery aspect. Perhaps this cup of water, this is our recovery for the week. And if you're going super hard and you've been doing it week after week after week, by the time you get to that second push session, for example, you did push pull legs off. You're not 100%. There's nothing left in the cup. So we're trying to focus on chest. I might pull back the volume on the other days. So even though you're doing legs once a week, I might say, hey, instead of the 15 sets, let's bring this down to 10 to 12 sets. Maybe on the pull day, let's decrease the frequency a little bit. Things like that is what I do. But again, would I do that all day one? No, the only thing I'm going to do day one, I'm going to assess what you've been doing. If the split is horrible, I'm going to adjust it and say, hey, I want you to do this instead, because you tell me you want to bring up your chest, but you're doing legs on the first day and you have 3 leg days. It doesn't make sense to me. So that's kind of how I would go about it.
So let's just jump into a diet, because we are talking about for around 30 minutes and we just get through one question. So the off-season diet, because there's a trend right now to stay a much more leaner. I wanted to say a little bit more leaner, but these days there is not such a thing like a little bit more leaner. It's either you're lean throughout the off season or you're just bulking. So do you believe in those old school bulkings when it comes to the guys like me? So let's say, that I probably need to put around like 15 to 20 pounds of like real tissue to be even try to compete in those with those guys up in those super heavyweights class. So would you like to risk it a little bit, or you think that is totally not like worth it to, because it's probably not gonna get me any more muscle, but we just need to diet a little bit longer?
Hugely sorry for the interruption, guys, but thanks to your comments, subscriptions, and thumbs up, I'm even able to create a podcast like you're watching right now. So if you can, please leave the subscription, comments, and simply a thumbs up. If you wanted to further support me, please use my code. And without further ado, let's get back to the podcast.
I think the more advanced you get, the less likely I'll ever try to push someone to be north of 15 or 16% body fat. Now, I don't know how much you know about my past. I'm a fat kid, okay? I don't have the best genetics. So for me, if you ask me to gain weight, I can gain weight. Gain muscle, a little different. I've always been from the school of thought of the leaner, the more efficient the system, the more runway you have. So my guys, I mean, this is going back 10 years, they'll stay leaner in the off season. For them, again, lean could change, right? For some people, metabolically, they can just be leaner, eating good copious amount of calories. For other people, they're naturally going to gravitate toward being a little heavier, but still lean for that specific person, right?
Yeah.
To where, you know, maybe you should have traces of abs and lines, veins, things like that. I'm not going to push, as someone accrues more tissue, depending on the gear usage, age, how lab work looks, the more body fat I put on them, all I'm doing is having them start to push thresholds that are now you can't be in a bulking phase as long because your insulin sensitivity is crappy. So now all we're doing is we're having like this zigzag approach. So for me, I've always been from the school of thought of if I can keep someone lean, I can have them grow at a much more linear rate. I don't think growth will ever be linear, but I'll damn near try to do it as linear as possible versus the old school thought. To me, Dorian Yates, 50 pounds up, and then he has to drop all that weight. That's a lot on your heart. And eventually, as we get older, as you know, and you see now with many deaths and bodybuilding, stuff like that, you start to have health problems. So that's why I've always tried to keep people leaner. I look at it like a car engine. Do you have to change the oil in your car? No, you should. It'll last a lot longer.
Great, great. So when it comes to the counting macros, we need to assess that first, because there are coaches who are counting only the like direct source, let's say it like that. So just
Yeah.
the proteins are your meats and maybe whey isolates and egg whites, and the carbs are just rice, oats, and stuff like that. And those who are counting everything, so the trace fats, trace like carbs in some sort of like Greek yogurts and stuff like that. What's like camp you are?
I'm a super analytical person. So at the end of the day, I'm driven by data and then that coupled with what I'm seeing. When I used to do things before I had an app to where everything today, to answer your question, I have the macros for everything. So oatmeal, for example, 40 grams of oats, you're getting the 5 grams of protein, 2.5 grams of fat, 24 grams of carbs, right? I count everything in my app so the person sees. When I used to do things through a PDF, or if I'm talking to someone and they tell me they have, 200 grams of protein a day and they have 5 meals, I'll say, okay, how are we getting the 40 grams of protein a meal? They're probably most of the time doing what I used to do where, okay, they might be having 7 ounces, 170 grams of, or 200 grams of lean protein, right? Say that's 50 grams of protein or average. That's what they're probably doing. But now, for the most part, I calculate everything. However, we know for an off season, and let's just say you're having, I don't know, a gross amount of carbs, 750 carbs, we're getting, north of 30 to 40 extra grams of protein. So, those are not things that really matter in the grand scheme of things. However, as we start to go into a dieting phase, I know in my head, okay, where I can pull from.
Great. So when it comes to the protein, are you more like a higher, medium, or low protein guy? And what's would be high, low, and medium for you when it comes to the protein? Best if you can use grams per kilo would
Sure.
be great, because I'm just terrible with that conversion.
I'd say as low as I would go is about 2.4 to 2.5. As high as I would go is 3.5. Okay.
So for me, for a guy like me,
Mm-hmm. So if you're 200, you're saying 200 kilos?
I would
100,
I'm
kilos.
thinking more like, do you believe that more protein is equal more potential in muscle growth? Because we all know that it's all just came into what you can digest. Because if your digestion's screwed because of the
Yeah.
protein, you're probably not doing yourself a favor. But let's say that my digestion is just pitch perfect. So we can use even 500 grams of protein if we wanted to. Do you believe it that amount would really equals a little bit more of lean tissue growth, or you just think that it is really poor and really like expensive carbs
I think
or like energy source that we don't use, we
so.
don't need that?
Yeah, no. So okay, I get the question a little bit more. I've always been, I'd say, moderate to high protein. I think for many individuals, at some point when you have a lot of mass, it's too much protein. You're going to have digestive issues. It's just a matter of time. Maybe if you're in a dieting phase, preserve muscle, we increase protein a little bit, or we can take it down and replace it with carbs. But for the most part, I think until you have a lot of mass, because you'll hear instances where there's guys that I had at the Olympia and other individuals, they'll say their proteins for their body weight and muscle mass, their protein's kind of low. But the reality is you didn't get there with low protein. You got there with a
Yeah.
good amount of protein. You might have had digestive issues, and now you don't need as much because the foundation was built. So for me, moderate protein, at the minimum, I'll push it high. But at some point, do I think you, for example, need 450 grams of protein? No, I don't. I don't think you need 450 grams of protein. I think 300 to 350 is probably plenty to do its job. And the more nuances are going to go into what we're taking, recovery, how we're training, how consistent you are, stuff like that.
Okay, great. But that was a that was like something that's just attract my curiosity, because you says that they are built, they base on higher protein,
Hmm.
but right now they have the base, so they are don't need those higher amount of protein. Isn't that still like leads to thinking that if we can build the most amount of muscle, so the base,
Hmm.
because of a little bit more protein, a use of a little bit more protein even later in our career would be yields to a little bit more gain. This is, I know that I am
Yeah.
just trying to,
No,
yeah, but
I get.
I
I get what
just
you're
there's
saying.
this, yeah,
I think at some point there's a negative response to it, and what I mean by that is the reward that you're getting for more protein, you're not getting as much, just like gear, for example, right? In theory, if I take 500 and I get here, if I took 1,000, I'll get here. That's not always the case. How many times do you see people take
yeah.
less, right? Less is more. So I think digestively, your body can only handle so much. And at some point, it just becomes a problem. So you know what your threshold is.
Yeah.
And like what I was saying earlier, I'm thinking of guys like a Jay Cutler, people that I know were higher protein, that over the years when they're eating their 8 meals, 10 ounces, they have much lower now, and they still got a good amount of muscle on them. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And they're not taking gear. They don't train the same. So I think once you get to that point where you might have digestive issues or you have a lot of tissue, you don't need as much. Yeah, you're going to get more from the carbohydrates and, substrates like that.
Yeah, I'm really understands your standpoint, and this is why I've asked, because we both know that this is like the one and only truth. Because even right now, I have like a period when I was just trying to downsize.
Mhm.
Like I just wanted to get a little bit shrinked because of my health, because I just stopped like thinking about competing. So I'm just bodybuilding for myself. So I just thought that maybe just getting down a little bit would be a great idea. So
Mhm.
I was just eating like 200 grams of protein, maybe. I am not shooting any gear, like none. Yeah, not even done PCT or anything, just cold turkey. And then I got sciatica nerve like damage. So
Oh,
like for 2 months, I've almost not lifted. Like my just training was pathetic. Just like I went to a gym maybe like once a week and do like 20 kilos chest machine press because I was barely moving. Those days when I can't just get up. My right leg is like 30 to 45% shrinked compared to the other legs. But other than that, I would just say I haven't lost that much of muscle still. It's really hard. I know that I've met oh my gosh, Chris Tuttle once, on a backstage when I was with my athlete, and we've chat a little, and he was smiling at me, like because I was convinced that I'm gonna lose that muscle as quickly as I wanted to, and he just looked at me and, brother, you'll see,
Yeah.
and yeah, and like I have like that's totally off topic, but for those guys who are struggling with like mental blocks of like getting off the gears or just lowering on a certain like uh, time because of the health phase or something like that, and they are afraid of losing strength or something like that. I am right now like natural, and I would say that even though I haven't lifted for a 2 months straight, yesterday I was at the gym and I benched 120 kilos, like I was like just warming up. Then nothing for 2 months, off gear totally, and still I've lost maybe like 10 to 15% of strength, and it's just because like neurological loss. So probably I would just get into a groove and probably get that strength back in 2 to 3 weeks, maybe maximum. So for those guys who are worried about lowering their protein or gear or anything else, you just mentally cannot just jump over that fence. But it is really not that important as you guys think. So I just wanted to pinpoint that because I have many clients right now who are just fucking kidding me, brother. I saw like they filled out the check-in forms, and I saw a guy who's working up for 10 years straight, almost 2 grams of gear weekly, and he benches like 100 kilos, squats 130 kilos. That's pathetic. That's like we need to lower that's like expectation of getting on gear or anything. It's like a natural, like mediocre natural level. So yeah.
No, and I'm glad that you brought it up because I think when it comes to protein, it's one of those things where the longer you coach, the anecdotal evidence that you have, right? I have many cases where people do take in lower protein, they're still making progress. And they're like, oh, all those years I was getting, I had to eat 14 ounces of fish with my meals. I'm like, you didn't maybe have to do that. It might have worked. And then it stops working because you have digestive issues or you have a problem. You're not able to do it anymore, right? So I think when you get that anecdotal evidence, you start to challenge those schools of thought that you need a certain amount of protein per kilo. That's not the case because if you're not absorbing it, if you're not assimilating it, now we have a problem, right? So, and I have another example where usually in the off season, everyone gets to a point where they struggle to eat a little bit, right? To me, that signals there's a problem when we're not hungry anymore. We're looking at our food and it takes us 45 minutes to eat compared to the 5 minutes it should take maybe if you're hungry. Eventually, right, for some people, I don't want to lower their food drastically too much. So maybe I'll lower the protein. And then they're like, Kyle, I can eat all my food again. Awesome, cool. We knew what was slowing down the process, right? And then we just have to kind of go back to figuring out not getting to that point where you can't eat anymore. And sometimes it's a time thing. It's just a lot of food on our GI to handle over time starts to bog us down a little bit.
Yeah, that's the biggest trap in bodybuilding, that you get used to the feel of something and you just can't really like comprehend what would be when you change something. For example, I've had like severe sleep apnea for years, to the point that I was talking with a like doctor on an appointment and I fall asleep just talking with him. So to that point. And I thought everything is okay. I'm just tired because I'm heavy. That's normal. And then I've bought like a Sleep Up, and everything's just magically changed. Like I was just like like fresh born man each like morning. So that was something that's really, it's really hard to explain for those who are not like experience those kind of things. But the same with lowering the protein. Most of the times your waist just gonna shrink, and you're gonna fart much less, and
Right.
everyone's around you gonna be happier. So that's the only way that's probably gonna change.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the fats, because carbs probably you're gonna say as high as the calories are allowed, but the fats is curious because in the United States or over the like a big water out there, it's like a
Yeah.
trend. I saw that for a little bit higher amount of fats compared to, for example, Europe, because here, for example, like Roman Fritz or many of other guys like using almost none of the additional fats. Maybe they have some with like a tiny bit of red meat they eat, or maybe like a 1 to 2 whole eggs in the morning, and that's it. And in the United States, it's pretty normal to add like oils or peanuts, butter, or like cashew butter or anything else
Right.
to almost every single meal. So, what's your approach?
So my approach from a nutrition standpoint, obviously, if we're in the off season, calories need to be above maintenance to grow. But my thing, and it also helped in keeping people leaner and insulin sensitivity from becoming a problem. I would always utilize fats to where maybe your calories are the same on a Thursday that you train as a Friday, but Friday, the calories from carbohydrates are higher because the carbs are higher, fats are lower, right? I think for many years, even in America, there's coaches that come to mind, like a Matt Porter, rest in peace. He was someone very high carb, extremely low fat, like trace fats only, right? And it works up until a point where perhaps it doesn't anymore, just like many things in bodybuilding where our bodies adapt. But fats are really important, right? They're anti inflammatory, hormonal support, joint health, all of these things, specifically to meals. They're going to be better tasting, right? A lot of the times when people enjoy the way something tastes, it isn't because it was 100 grams of carbs. It was because it's got fats in it, more juicy.
Yeah.
So my take with fats is always ensuring, especially for natural athletes, I have a lot of them, or my females coming in post contest. I want to make sure I have enough fats to support metabolic health and hormonal health and things like that. And when you deprive yourself for an extended period of time in a contest prep, and there's a lot of stress and allostatic load is very high because we're in a deficit, cardio might be high, the training, you might have super supplements or PEDs, whatever you want to call them, in play, it starts to become a problem. So that's why I always like to include fats. So I wouldn't say I have a one size fits all cap that I wear where you have to follow this approach. It's just normally you'll see in an off season. I have days that are lower in carbs. So in theory, some might look at that as carb cycling. But to me, carb cycling is sometimes more defined by, hey, I have 3,000 calories and then I have 2,500 calories, and then I have 2,000 calories. Protein and fat never really changed. Maybe trace protein did, right? Because the carbs, as we talked on earlier, but in general, the carbs are what's driving the manipulation. But for me, even in off season, I've noticed countless times not only improvements to lab work from when you have fats in play, but keeping someone's insulin sensitivity in check as they're growing and accruing more tissue, coupled with being able to be consistent and train without injuries, not driving down fatigue, more so the case because there's fats in play.
Okay, great. So actually, the next question was about the topic of the carb cycling, or just simple like rotation throughout the training and non-training days. Do you use something like that? Like you said, you for example would lower my carbs and bump it up fats a little bit, or just simply added a little bit more fats in certain days. But is those certain days are just linked into some sort of like scenario, for example, rest days, or maybe you just structure it like maybe you added it on the less like valuable for you days. So for example, if my legs are great, that maybe lowers the carbs on those days, and you get what I'm
I get what you're
trying
saying.
to get to.
In an off-season approach, because that's what we're referring to, right? It could change obviously in a prep scenario, but just so the viewers don't think we're talking in different areas, right? In an off-season approach, I will have days, let's just say, we'll use legs because I love legs. We're trying to build your legs. They stink. They're not good, okay? I'm going to have carbohydrates probably higher on those days. I may even look at the diet, right? So maybe it's Monday and Friday you're training legs. Those days are going to be higher in carbohydrates, and then maybe you train arms one day. Again, not specific to you, where I'm just using
Of
in
course.
theory. On arm day, I'll keep the carbs lower. Maybe the fats are a little bit higher. And then on a rest day, the carbs might be a lot lower and the fats are, again, a little bit higher. So as far as, again, I'm not including free meals or cheat meals or anything like that, but I guess to come full circle here, I'll utilize more so of an approach in the off season where the days that I'm really looking to drive performance on a body part are going to be supported with carbohydrates so that they can drive performance. The days that I'm like, okay, this muscle can maintain. I'm not really looking for it to get better. It's great. Just go have some fun. Carbohydrates are going to be lower. And then on a rest day, depending on the person's body type, for some people, I know maybe because we have growth hormone in play, their sensitivity becomes a problem. Or again, I use myself from anecdotal experience. If I have carbohydrates with every meal, every day, I will get fat as hell very quickly. My insulin sensitivity goes crazy. So I'll say, okay, one day a week, I need to keep the carbs pretty low. Obviously, I'm not looking to eat my fingers, so fats are at a place where they're on at least 50 a day. And then maybe that night I'll have a free meal because I'm going to load myself for the next day's leg session or something like that. So it's kind of hard for me to give a specific answer, but I'm hoping you understand what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's that I wanted to get into your thought process, but how that really works that you are not eating clean carbs throughout the day just to eat some sort of cheat meal in the night, and that keeps you a little bit more leaner.
So in that case, like I said, psychologically for some people, I don't want them to feel like dieting is a chore. I think the people that
Oh,
do the
okay.
best, they don't feel like they're dieting. They're like, hey, I follow a nutritional plan. I love it. I love the variety in it because I'm not one person that's
Okay,
going to tell you that you have
I
to eat
get
chicken
it.
and rice. But one day a week for mental sanity purposes, I'll do that. But again,
Oh,
just remove the free meal or cheat meal because sometimes that is not very good for people. They have bad relationships with food, which is a whole nother conversation. I'll keep carbs just lower that day, and I'll probably keep them.
yeah.
If the person has a
Yeah.
high
I thought that you were
demanding job.
referring to your situation of that not
Oh,
eating the
oh, oh, oh,
carbs
oh.
throughout the day just to keep insulin
No, no,
sensitivity
no, no.
high, and then eat like a huge cheat
But
meal with like like we have studies that's shown that even one big cheat meal could lowers your insulin sensitivity like
could if you eat. So I
almost.
wouldn't eat a crazy meal. Like I'm not
Yeah,
someone that's
yeah.
going to say, hey, go, excuse me, binge and have 5,000 calories in a
Yeah.
meal. Obviously, that's not healthy. I think that's a problem.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I just wanted to clear that out because that was like it was just linked too close together. And
You're right. You're right. I'm sorry. Yes.
so I'm not gonna ask you about the cheat meals because you are actually just referred to that pretty clearly. That's for some guys who just uh, who are there like structure wise and maybe like a um, higher on the work ethic side, you can allow for them. For example, you worked with Nick Walker, and
Mhm.
he probably you can just tell him to have the cheat meal, and you know that he is not gonna binge on something. But
Right.
we both know that there are clients who just taking those cheat meals like free feasts, and that's probably gonna be the last meal on their lives. So this easily can go over the board. So that's going
And
to
the
vary
one
it
thing,
throughout the clients.
the one thing I'll touch on, that I think is important for people. Um, I think should everyone be able to have a free meal? I prefer calling it a free meal, honestly. Psychologically, cheat meal make
Yeah,
people think they have to have like pizza, which I don't think has a
yeah,
place really in the diet. Once in a while, could you have a slice of pizza? Yes. Do I think if you have a whole pie, I think that's probably going to make you feel like crap. That's not good. But in theory, for many people, that aren't competitors, I think they should be able to have a meal a week where they can enjoy something, whether that means going out or cooking something at home, foods they enjoy. Do your thing. When I'll remove it is when someone will tell me, hey, what I ate last night, I'm up for 3 kilos. And I'm just like, okay, obviously you have a problem. Whatever you're eating is creating a problem from a GI standpoint, or I know you're eating a bolus amount of food and you have a bad relationship. So in those cases, I'll still try to encourage someone to have this free meal, but I'll control it and I'll say, hey, you're going to have a steak and potato instead. You can go to whatever restaurant you want, enjoy yourself, have a fun, maybe appetizers like a seafood, a shrimp or something, a cocktail, something like that, and then a small dessert, right? But don't go and find yourself up 3 kilos the next day. In that case, I think people are overeating, and it's more a problem of in America, if I had to be honest.
Yeah. So, in regards to that, what are the biggest diet mistakes that you can make in the off season, in your opinion, based on your experience with the clients? Like, for example, me. So, with the clients that should be theoretically like experienced and know what are the rules of that games, but they are still catching on those small things that ruin their off season each year.
I would say in no particular order, right? That one thing that comes to mind, not having enough variety in your diet. A lot of bodybuilders, the old school is, hey, you have to only have
Yes.
chicken and rice. If you just have chicken and rice, you're going to have problems at some point. I don't care how little or how much of it you have. At some point, I always tell my clients, you're going to put the pen down to this bodybuilding chapter. Sometimes it's a long career and it's very rewarding. Other times it's not the healthiest and you leave early. You don't get what you want. You want to go back into normal life. Normal life isn't having chicken and rice 5 times a day. Okay. So I think when we don't have enough variety in our diet, our gut microbiome starts to get destroyed and starts to have problems. So mistake number 1 is just eating the same foods every single day. I understand if you think it's hardcore, it's not. It's actually going to impede your progress at some point for sure. Another aspect that I think people make mistakes with is thinking that they need to continue to add food because the scale is not moving. At the end of the day, no matter what you take, no matter how perfect your recovery is, how hard you train, how you never miss a meal, you can only grow so fast. You don't need to see the scale going up a kilo every week. If the scale's going up a kilo every week, because I have clients that are just like, hey, I only gained half a pound. That's fine. Okay. Over the course of the last 4 weeks, we're up 2 kilos. I love it. Awesome. You're still hungry. When you continue to push the scale and you use the scale as the tool of progress or digress, that's where it's problematic. So I think that's a problem. I also think there's a problem where some people think in this bulk, because they use the bulk and cut as like extremes, they have to be eating crappy food. No, we don't want to hurt what we're now. That's just as bad as eating the same foods, right? You eat crappy food, you know how you feel. I think the more experienced bodybuilders, you mentioned like Chris Tuttle, and when I do the podcast with Andrew, we're all at the point now because they're a little older than me. They've been doing it longer, but the older and more advanced you get, it's not that we can't have a free meal because mentally we're going to drive ourselves off the cliff. We don't have it because the next morning, I don't even feel good going to sleep that night. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it messes me up. And I always tell people like, listen, don't eat crap, just eat crap. When I was younger, maybe you can agree, I would have a free meal or a cheat meal. At that time, it was definitely a cheat meal, dirty foods in the morning. I would say, hey, I'm going to go train legs. My workouts always sucked. My stomach was bloated, right? And I couldn't eat the rest of the day. So I think it's a mistake when people eat a lot of crappy foods and they're bulking. And then the final thing that comes to mind, eating too much food or too little. So let's just say you have a person in the off season, they're trying to put on muscle and they're like, hey, I've been eating 3,200 calories. I never miss tracking. Cool. And then I give them their diet and it's maybe 3,300 on training day, 3,000 on a non-training day. But coach, I said I wanted to bulk. You can make some progress if things are set up the correct way.
Yeah.
You're going to make progress. You don't have to be eating 1,000 calories above your maintenance, right? And I think sometimes people think you have to because they read, if I'm not in a surplus, I can't grow. The reality is there's a lot more that goes into it. If you are even in a slight surplus, whether that's from extra protein, extra carbs, extra fats, but you're not training and you just sit home every day and I sit in this computer and type, I'm going to get fat. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't matter if it's clean food or not. So I think those are common things that I see people sometimes fall victim to. And I think that shoots them in the foot a little bit.
Yeah, I've always can grasp on that idea of the like American bodybuilders who are like saying in a fashion like they are hardcore because I quoted, I haven't had cheat meal in 3-4 weeks. Like that was something crazy to them. Like in Europe, if you have like a cheat meal from your like coach once a year, you're lucky. So, so yeah, look, maybe this these days it's changed, but I remember when I started cheat meal, it wasn't even on my vocabulary. It wasn't a thing. We all was scared to eat anything with the sugar, with anything like that's gonna probably destroy the whole of your gains. And out there, it's pretty normal to eat a single like off meal at least once a week.
I think what you said is very true, and I think that's when you have a coach, or even if you don't have a coach, if you're just being honest with yourself, you don't want to have a poor relationship with food. And what the conversation that I have in onboarding someone, and I say, okay, this is our goal. If we're doing something that's going to hinder our goal, I just try to say to someone, hey, it's not that you can't have this free meal on a Friday night. However, you mentioned you do have this goal, and I notice that every time you do this, it's actually taking us longer to get to where we want to go. So by all means, if that's what you want to do, go for it. I'm just letting you know what I think is going to happen, and now our timeline is going to shift. So having that honest conversation, it's not that you can't do it. It's just maybe there's a smarter approach to it.
Yeah, I've always said to my clients that, for example, like we have something like national, like a international, like Polish. I don't know if it's national, international, but Polish, like a donut day. Like they celebrating, I don't know what, but they are just eating. Everyone's just competes on how much of donuts they could eat. Like I've eat 20. I can eat 30. And stuff like that. So there are guys who are always like talking like wildly about them wanted to go and win their pro card and stuff like that. And then on the check-ins, you see like I eat 6 donuts or something like that. So it is like clear indication of you just don't want it.
Yeah.
You just don't want it bad enough. And this is like a simple way of explaining what you're talking and what you're doing. It is not matching, brother. So it's not possible. So when it comes to the mini cuts, because these days, like mini cuts for some coaches are almost like a staples. I've like heard about the plans that says like, for example, they structure off seasons in like 25 weeks long, and in a week 30, 15 or anything like that, they would structure the mini cuts. Do you do something like that, or maybe you are not using mini cuts at all, or maybe you're using it only if it needed? So, for example, to just improve the digestion, or maybe just a little bit help with getting off some water. Of you know what I'm going to.
Yeah, I know. You're taking some of the words from me. Will I use them? Absolutely. I think everyone will use them to some extent. The reasoning as to why can differ. Now, let's just take the most obvious. Hey, you got too fat. Okay. We have a problem. We shouldn't have got fat to begin with, but because we did, but now we're not going to put on muscle as well, right? We're not using and assimilating the nutrients the same way. So it doesn't matter how clean the food is. We got to clean. Fat does not turn to muscle. I think some people think it does. Trust me, I was fat. It did not turn to muscle. So in that case, I'll introduce a mini cut. And another reason I might is, let's just say we get lab work back. Maybe the person looks like they're in good conditioning. However, fasted insulin is double digits, close to 15, 20, right? We have some markers, cholesterol is horrible. I'd say, okay, we have a problem. Maybe there's inflammation, right? We see our CRPs high, liver, maybe GGTs through the roof. I'd say, okay, we have to stop what we're doing because it's not going to lead to success. You're actually compromising your health. So in that case, I'll use a mini diet as well. Now, you didn't ask this, but I can foresee the next question. How long or what will you do
Yeah.
to define mini cut? To me, the other reason I'll use it, digestively. At some point, no matter how great you are training, you're going to say, hey, I'm kind of not hungry anymore. To me, being hungry is a fantastic thing. Saliva is the best digestive enzyme. When we are salivating over our food, we want it, you're going to eat faster, okay? When you get to that point where you're like, hey, I just can't eat. I look at my meal one and I don't want to eat it. It doesn't matter what it is. I'll say, okay, well, we've been in this bulk for 16 weeks. We've been pushing hard. Time to take a break. Let's pull on back. Now, getting back to the question that I think you had that I asked myself, what will I do? Usually I will decrease calories. Now, in some instances, let's just say the person is in very good shape. However, we have some lab markers. Like I mentioned, insulin is just not where it needs to be. That's when I'll definitely deploy some type of approach where their carbohydrates are going to be lower to improve that right away. If they're having digestive issues, right? Maybe they're like, hey, I'm having acid reflux. How we identify that, other than the person being honest, I'll get it often. Hey, I have hiccups, I have acid reflux. What are you cooking with? Maybe there's garlic, onion powder, shit like that. Remove, right? In that mini cut or that phase, I'm bringing down foods and I'm introducing more of a acid reflux type diet, Mediterranean diet. I'm going to start to pay attention to what I'm giving that person. Maybe they'll get a GI map in significant cases where someone's really having issues. But getting back to this mini cut here, the length of it, I don't want to be in a mini cut for really more than 4 weeks, at the most 6 weeks, if it was like really needed. And the reason for that is because we have a goal, right? You're saying you want to be an open bodybuilder. Why am I going to spend 16 weeks in a surplus, 8 weeks in a deficit? Rule number one, especially if we're just adding all this tissue and you've done a really good job, you're up 10 kilos in, over the year. If we just go right into dieting hard, the first thing that's going to come off isn't the body fat. It's going to be the muscle that we just worked to put on. So I think that's very important. So yeah, those are kind of the things that come to mind. I'm sure I might have missed one or two things, but in terms of duration, like I said, 4 weeks, it could be as little as 2 weeks sometimes, just to kind of get the water off someone. Maybe their joints were beat up, so they're not in the gym, things like that.
One question is in regards to that. Do you cut it really high, like from the get-go? For example, like calories in half, and we just trying to get off as much as we can in those 2 to 4 weeks? Or do you just lower it, like maybe pull it back a little bit, or maybe just pull a little bit of carbs and maybe an off meal or something like that?
So what an awesome question, because I didn't answer that. So thank you. It can vary a bit. Now let's just, because a female, for example, they're not going to have crazy amount of food I'm cutting in half. For guys, let's just say you, right? We're eating a bolus amount of calories over 4,000. I might pull you down to 3,300 calories just to make sure that you're really getting a good break. And again, if the person wasn't necessarily fat, quote unquote, I hate to use the word fat, chunky, hefty, I'm not so much doing the mini cut for anything other than improving insulin sensitivity or getting their body primed for another push. You know what I'm saying? If someone is heavy, then I'm going to introduce maybe cardio. If markers are messed up on lab work and the person doesn't know cardio, they just train hard. Hey, get your ass off the ground. Let's go do some hit sessions, right? Let's restore some functioning.
Yeah, you've mentioned hit session, and next question is cardio in the off season. Do you like to keep the cardio throughout the whole off season? And if so, it would be like something like you've just mentioned, hit, or maybe just steady state. And how many times, and what would be the duration of those sessions? For a guy like me, let's remember that.
Gotcha. I've always been a big proponent of cardio. I think it's great. And the one thing I do like about the fitness industry of late, people are starting to incorporate cardio more than ever before, which I think is great. Okay. Because not too long ago, people, cardio, I'm trying to build muscle. Uh, to me, cardio, especially when you implement maybe something like HIIT, not only does that train your VO2 max and improve your cardiovascular health and your heart health in general, you're able to train more. You have better endurance. You can push those heavy sets. You got more in
Yeah.
you, right? You're better at just breathing and being able to use oxygen. In the off season, I've always liked cardio. I'll use more sometimes hit based sessions. So let's just say, in your case, you're an open guy. You're not sloppy. If you're always getting, I would use two markers here. One, what do you do all day long? So non-exercise activity thermogenesis, right? What exactly are you doing? Do you just sit in this desk like I do and I get 2,000 steps? You're definitely doing some cardio, right? You got to do something. Let's just say you do go to work or you're chasing a kid around, right? So you get 8 to 10,000 steps no matter what. Fantastic. In your case, hey, 2 sessions a week, able to do 15-minute intervals, 1 minute hard, 1 minute slow. Maybe this person wants to do some battle rope or ball slams. I'll try to keep it fun, right? Maybe the spin bike, which is horrible on your legs. It's very tough on your legs, but it's enjoyable if you like that pain. These are things I'll put in because it's going to help performance. It's going to help lab work. It's going to help digestion, which is most important. Why I've always incorporated cardio, because again, I can't tell you how many cases I can give you of someone that comes to me, hey, I can't eat. And it's not because of taking orals or the drugs or they're toxic.
Yeah.
It's because they just sit on their ass all day, right? And it's just like,
Yeah.
hey, let's get you moving, right? Get up in the morning, go get some steps, or how about go do like a bout of HIIT? And then they're like, I'm hungry again. Of
Yeah.
course you are, right? It's not a magic formula. So that's how I'll do cardio in the off season. I'll keep it low impact for people that are constantly moving around. In other instances, for someone like myself or you, in a perfect world, maybe 2, 3 hit sessions. Fantastic. Keeps our body fat at bay, keeps our digestive tract or keeps our appetite signaling very high. And then, that's kind of how I'll go about it.
Do you use those kind of like minimal steps amount for a day, or do you don't like to track this?
If the person is someone who tracks steps, in my app that I have for coaching, I have it built in to where via Bluetooth, it tells me what their steps are, as well as their sleep and stuff like that. If you have like an Aura Ring or Apple Watch, Whoop Band, stuff like that. Do I make someone go out? Let's just say someone is 30, 40 years old. They've never tracked steps. No, I won't make them go do it. I might encourage them and I'll say, hey, there's this benefit, this benefit, and this benefit of why I suggest it. I'm not going to tell you I'm not going to work with you because you don't count steps and you didn't count steps for 30 years. Um, I like to use it, especially with technology nowadays, just to get an idea because it'll also help me. Because in your case of this whole hypothetical situation, we're trying to prep. So when we go to prep, I want to know, what do you do on a normal basis? Because as I start to pull calories down, if we're not seeing the response as we get deeper in prep, if I realize that, hey, you went from getting 10,000 steps every day and now you're tired all the time, so you get 3,000, my lowering of calories, you just offset because you're not doing anything. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So probably the most waiting for part of this podcast, so PEDs in the off season. So
Gotcha.
what would be like the perfect let's say like for the get go, I am the perfect client. So whatever you wanted to use with me works for me just fine. I don't have any side effects. I'm just the machine. So like a
Very nice.
perfect scenario. So what would be the choice of yours when it comes to those off season, knowing that we have to probably push those limits a little bit to get me on like to the new areas of my
Yeah.
future problems with breathing.
Yeah.
But you just like to use like something like old fashioned stacks. So for example, maybe like test EQ and some nandrolone, or you just more on the side of those DHT as high as possible to keep the estrogen in check with the least amount of testosterone or the highest amount of testosterone. You just you can like tolerate with a certain amounts of E2 in place.
So my school of thought has changed over the years. When I was younger, like many, more is better. Let's just fucking take what we can take. That's how I would do things, man. I'm being honest. As I've gotten older, anecdotal experience, I see the effects of certain compounds. I realized that, okay, we can't all do this. And the most eye-opening thing for me, because I was around all of these elite people, the Nick Walkers, the Ians, the Bumsteads, I realized that, hey, I can take double what you take and I don't look like you. And I train hard as fuck. There's a problem, right? It's just, I'm never going to look like you. It doesn't matter. So those are all reasons as to why I don't use such high dosages and people consider me conservative now. But in your case, where you're the perfect athlete, I would still try to gather some evidence from historically speaking. Okay. I would say, okay, what was your last push phase? What did your lab work look like? What changed, right? How hard, what actually worked? Because again, you're coming to me experienced. You're not just the virgin 18, 19-year-old. Let's just hope they're that old by the time they start, because there's younger ones out there. But in terms of you, I would say, okay, based on your experience, what you're telling me you feel like has worked, and let's just say everything works. Go ahead.
Yeah. So let's say that previously I was booking on something like around 800 to a gram of tests and around a similar amount of EQ. So for example, like 1.5, 2 grams of gear was like pretty much stable for me for over those years. 10 IUs of GH year round. For me, that was like something that's kept my glucose in check. Never had a problem with that. Never have problems with high hematocrit of hemoglobin or anything like that. Like always like have pretty good labs on that, so never have like a severe problems or anything like that on those kind of compounds. And this is like a baseline for me. So from that point, what would be the way you push the needle?
So how I can push the needle, I'm going to say, okay, how long do we have that we can bulk, right? Obviously, if we're in between shows, stuff like that, we don't have as much time. So I'm using maybe faster acting things, or maybe if I'm starting in a cleanup phase, I'm using like trend in the beginning, maybe, right? But in an off-season standpoint, you're in good condition. From a test standpoint, no matter what I use, I'll preface, I will always titrate things up. Now, does that mean I titrate them up every 10 days? No. I can, as early as 2 weeks, as late as 4 weeks. I'm going to slowly taper things up. And then usually, no matter what I'm using, EQ being the tail end of it, I'm never using more than 10 to 12 weeks of something. EQ maybe 14 weeks. But after that, to me, unless you continue driving the dosages up, just switch compounds. You're going to get more of a result from switching compounds. And I'm sure you probably have that experience yourself. From a test standpoint, if you're saying, hey, I take 1,000, that's my minimum. I'll say, okay, let's start around 600 probably in your case. Usually I would start, if someone was on a TRT dose, a true TRT dose, I will clarify because people think 200 is TRT. It's not. Let's just say you're on 125 a week. In a perfect world, I'm going to start you around 400, okay? Maybe I'll start with some MPP. You mentioned, hey, based on lab work, I've never had a problem with my estradiol getting too high. Using an androlone never gave me any side effects of depression, being emotionless. It didn't act on that progesterone receptor where I have more effects from my estradiol, right? What I'll do, let's just say I start you at 450 test, and or if I said 400, 4 to 500 test, okay, just whatever. Half that amount, I'll start with the MPP, okay? From there, I'll start to titrate them up. So maybe I'll go to 600 and 300. Then maybe I'll go 750, 350. Then maybe your test, I like what I'm seeing. You're good here, 750, 400. Are we aromatizing more? Do we need an AI? Am I someone that wants to use Masteron or Primo to purposely keep our estradiol down? No, that's not why I'm going to do it. Will I do it in some cases? If you're like, hey, my HDL single digits, which I see with some top guys, okay, I'm not going to put an AI in, because no matter if I use a type 1 suicide inhibitor like an ecstasy, like a Romacin, or a type 2 like a Arimidex, we're going to just tank our lipids even more. And now we have a problem from a heart health standpoint, which again, I'm very big on not having. So in your case, like I said, I'll start with those two. Maybe for someone more experienced, I'll say, okay, let's incorporate some equipoise, right? So maybe week 6, I'll throw in some equipoise, or week 8, I'll throw in equipoise. I'll slowly titrate that up too. For some people, that really keeps estradiol pretty low. If that's the case, I can't bring it too high because I don't know if you ever ran I ran up to a good amount of gear. Let's just say I did 1,000 tests, 800 EQ. That didn't shut me down estradiol wise. I have another athlete, his estradiol is like 15, taking 600 EQ. It doesn't matter how much test I use, he has a problem. So I can't use that compound with him, right?
Yeah.
But in your case, we have the test MPP for the first 6 weeks. After that, maybe we have test MPP EQ. I always think the true and tried test DECA EQ is always a great bulking agent. I'll use MPP because if someone ever gets some type of side effect and it's the first time I'm working with them, regardless of them telling me their history, I want to be able to get rid of it. Any type of nandrolone side effect, I want to get out. If I'm using DECA and you have a problem, we got 2 to 3 weeks before you're going to clear this problem if I remove it, right? As far as how that cycle will continue, like I said, I'll probably pull the MPP out week 12. Then we have the test EQ that had started around that week 6 or 8 range. I'm going to run that all the way to week 14, 16, maybe the last part of that cycle. I'm like, hey, okay, we've got a lot of water on our frame. Maybe blood pressure is creeping up, right? These are all things I'm trying to ask and I consistently have data on. That's when I'll say, okay, maybe the last 6 weeks, let's throw in Masteron, or I'll throw in like a tren or something like that to end the cycle, to clean up the body fat that might have accrued, reasons like that. So again, I don't have like a one size fits all. The more I work with someone, the more I'm like, hey, this is what we did last off season. I like the results. Let's use the same compounds, but let's take a little more. Let's push the limit, see if we get more from it. If we don't, we know, okay, that's not the case. In other instances, from an oral standpoint, I'll just use orals usually to like boost performance. So I'm not, very rarely, if someone's like an adolescent, doesn't have a lot of muscle, then maybe I'll do like Anadrol or even D-bol. I don't use very often, but I'll do them more oftenly, almost an everyday type approach. But most of the time, in an off-season manner, I would say, okay, maybe on the certain body parts, I'll use the legs, for example, as I was speaking to earlier. I want you to take some Anadrol on your leg days. We'll do that for a 4 to 6 week period, and you're noticing, hey, I'm getting stronger. My leg press is up, my squat's up. Visually, my fucking legs are growing. I'm happy. Cool, as long as it's not problematic. The reason I stay away from some orals, even Anavar, usually to a lesser extent, the impact they have on appetite. At the end of the day, if you can't eat, I don't care how good you are at training or following your diet, now you can't get the food in. So now recovery is compromised. So that's always the most important. So that's why I like to save some orals aside from that little boost to bridge them, to get over like a hump from a strength standpoint. I'll save them for prep. You know, that's where I'll use things like Winstrol, Proviron, Anavar, stuff like that.
Yeah. And just to summarize that for those guys who are always wondering, just your honest like answer to that. And I just have to just say that loud. And this, remember, guys, that this is like a question for our guys who wanted to actively compete in a bodybuilding show, just to strive for a pro card and maybe have higher expectation than that. So it's not like a lifestyle client. Remember that. For guys like me, hundreds, over 100 kilos, like decent amount of muscle, because remember, I'm short. So what would be like the range of totals of the PEDs in your opinion? Like just more like experience wise, because we know that could be like difference between athletes, probably even on 1,000 milligrams, like end of the spectrum. But like just met in the middle, what would be the like for your opinion, like average dose for guys like that?
So my best athletes, the top pros you can think of, take less than most of my amateurs. That's a fact number one. In terms of how high I'll push amateurs, generally, do I have anyone over 1,000 milligrams to test? No. I have this young kid that came to me 2 weeks ago, tells me he takes 2,000 milligrams to test. I said, hey, man, if that's the case, I'm not your, I don't do that. I'm just being honest with you. I think that's fucking psychotic. I don't stand for that. I'm just being upfront with you. Cool. as far as what I'll get someone up to, usually you're gonna hit a threshold to where you don't get any benefit out of it. And again, because one thing I always preach, I think when you take something, the more you just want to throw the kitchen sink approach and add stuff in, the less likely you're ever going to know what actually worked, what caused the problem. So to me, your first cycle, take some test. 300 to 500 is great for a first cycle. Run it for 12 to 16 weeks. Chill. Next time, you could use test again. And you have two options. One, add something to it. Or two, go up higher, right? At some point, you're going to realize, okay, I don't grow any more off 1500 than I did off 750. So someone like Ian Valliere, who's very open about what he uses, he's tried higher, obviously. He said 750 is where I like to be. That's where I get the most growth. I have no side effects. Awesome. So in your case, you're the perfect storm. There's no issues at all. I'll put you up to 1,000, maybe even 1,250 of test. MPP, I'm never really going over 500, or even if I was using DECA, I think 500 is like a good amount usually. Equipoise, I don't see the need to go above 600, 800 max. I can think one time I had someone doing 1,000 tests, 800 EQ. Primo, which is hard to come by these days. I've never seen benefits at like 200 a week. So to me, if you're going to use Primo, it's 350 a week or more. When you start to get up to the higher amounts, I think you have some fullness and a good look to you, right? So the one thing I didn't touch on earlier, because I work with a lot of, I'll say social media superstars, they care not necessarily about the bodybuilding approach of growing. They care more about how they look. So they want to stay as lean as they can and look the part so they can be ready for any photo shoot at any time. In those cases, that's where I'll use the Primo, the Masteron more in this building phase. Because at the end of the day, could you grow? I'm a firm believer. If you told me, hey, I can only prep with, you say, I had somebody actually the other day, Kyle, I can't afford all the stuff we usually use in a prep. Tell me what I need to get. I could afford like 3 things. I say, okay, cool, no problem. I don't think you need certain drugs. I'll just work with what we have, right? Just like people back in the day. I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with Jay and other people. They just take, hey, this is what we had for this prep. This is what we had available. I used it, and I didn't have it for the next prep. So you don't have to use any certain thing. But just to wrap this portion up, I'd say from a total gram perspective, you're talking most likely for someone that's advanced, 750 to 2 grams. Very unlikely, especially if there's growth hormone in the mix, which we didn't really touch on much. I don't need to go as high. I've noticed that for a fact. If I have growth hormone in, not only does it keep you leaner, which I like, you have better performance training, you're fuller. The compounds work, the anabolics work better with growth hormone in. So generally speaking, once I get to a point of 750 test, 600 EQ, hey man, instead of adding a third drug here, let's get some growth hormone. Let's go that route.
Okay, great. So the next question is actually a GH, and the first and last question would be: do you believe that more is more when it comes to the GH? Obviously, taking into the consideration that we don't have the side effect, because if you just have the carpal tunnel syndrome right away, you're probably, even if you afforded hundreds I use daily, you just can't use it. So let's say that we don't have any of the side effects. So our blood pressure is perfect, blood glucose perfect. Even like the problems with thyroids, like abrogation, is under control because we are using something like T4, like mild doses, for example, 75 micrograms or 100 micrograms daily is keeping our thyroid in check. So would you be up to go over like 5, 10, 15, 20 IUs in those cases?
Hugely sorry for the interruption, guys, but thanks to your comments, subscriptions, and thumbs up, I'm even able to create a podcast like you're watching right now. So if you can, please leave the subscription, comments, and simply a thumbs up. If you wanted to further support me, please use my code. And without further ado, let's get back to the podcast.
I think at some point, no matter what, you're going to need insulin for taking a fuck ton of growth hormone. If I'm being, I don't want to cuss. Can I cuss? I'm sorry.
Never mind. I don't do it very often.
Okay.
At this point, YouTube is not analyzing it. It's too long.
I think from a growth standpoint, I do think more is better. Most people aren't what you're explaining to where they're like, hey, I can take 10, 15, I'm good. Right. I think there's a Russian that's been popular saying he took 100. Like
100,
that's
yeah.
not normal. Okay. It's not normal. So I don't want people to think you need to do that. Most of my athletes, even my best ones, even the ones I'm friends with and I've been with, I've injected, they take 10. That's like where they'll sit. Most of them six. Most classic guys, 4 to 8, they'll reside. Not taking much more than that. Um, as far as, I mean, I guess that kind of answers it, right? So I'll push it as high as I can. I don't really go above 10 because no one can afford it, generally speaking. And I've never seen someone not have issues. Because to me, if you're taking over 10 or 12, people taking a vial of Serostim a day, 18,
Yeah.
if you're not morphing, growth's not working for you, pal. Like this is not for you.
Yeah.
This is not for you. You know.
So, like personal question: how high you personally go with the GH? Like maybe like experience wise, because I've tried 20
Uh,
for like I don't even remember how long, like 4 weeks or something like that. And to be honest, my uh, glucose were like fasting blood glucose, and then obviously after that, like NYC was always really good, like lower
yeah,
than 70 in the morning. So, but I need to say that I am really freaking active throughout the day, and I've always
right.
doing a cardio throughout the year, almost 5 to 6 times a week. I'm doing something like 15 to 20 k of steps daily, training at that time like 6 times a week. So that's why I never eat like bad foods normally. Like maybe
Yeah,
once a week, I've eat something like a dinner with my wife. That's just regular portion. So other than that, I haven't seen any side effects on that. Like obviously that was only a 4 weeks. Other than that, I was crazy losing weight on that. Like I was getting shredded, even though I've bumped it up their calories up. So it's crazy high, like bumping up my metabolism crazy. So did you ever try something like that?
I've tried everything there is to try. I'll put it that way. I never tell people to do something that I don't kind of have any type of experience with, or I couldn't tell them how to administer it and know what to expect. The highest I've ever went with growth really is probably it was supposed to be more, but I was using some genotropin. I didn't measure correctly. I just wasn't paying attention back in the day, I guess. But I would say consistently, I was at like 10 to 12 for a short period of time. I should have been higher. That was the goal of when I was working with someone. They
Yeah.
told me to take 15 if I could. And I just didn't measure correctly. That was just my mishap at the time when I was younger. I'd say for the most part, have I noticed a distinct difference from 5 to 6, where I kind of reside now, to 10? No, I think the wallet is where I noticed the difference. You know what I'm saying? Um, as far as, there's different types of growth hormones. So people out there, I think growth is obviously super helpful. At some point, you need to administer insulin with it, probably because of
Yeah.
insulin sensitivity issues. So unless you're really meticulous with your diet and you can deal with like low sensitivity days where, the person's clearing a lot of water and stuff, there's Genla that's out there now. That's like a longer acting growth hormone that's supposed to keep blood sugar more at bay, right? So there's not enough research from a bodybuilding standpoint yet. I can't say I've noticed the difference playing with that. Um, but yeah, so I mean, to answer your question, like I said, I think 10 to 12 is where the highest I really went. Did I notice anything profound? No, because the reality also, I don't know about you, when you were taking your 15 or whatever you had said, I was taking other stuff too.
Sweaty.
I don't know. I don't know what the hell's working. You know what I'm saying? It's just like I didn't have a
Yeah.
controlled environment. That's why when people they try to say they cite research, there's only observational studies. There is no
Yeah.
controlled studies where they're like, hey, 10 of you guys come in this room, you never leave it. We don't have that, so we don't really know the effects of things. But yeah, that's kind of my take on it. For most people, I think 4 to 6 is a sweet spot. There's other things that, can be used like Increlex and things of that nature becoming more renowned and used. So yeah.
Yeah, the polypharmacy is something that is screwing everything. This is why whenever I'm gonna be healthy with my leg, the first things I'm gonna do is pumping up the gear and trying to rebuild some of
Yeah, yeah.
the losing fullness and stuff like that. And the goal is to use every compound like separately for at least couple weeks to clearly see what's doing what, because
Yeah.
I've never been on that place when I was totally clean again,
All
and
right.
I can really look up what's doing what. So the two last question, and I give you like a free. You're free to go because we are
Take your
all
time, man.
getting to 2 hours. So first of all, it's going to be insulin. Do you use it, or the better question is, do you think that it is a useful tool when it comes to the building muscle? I am not saying it isn't a useful tool to keep your like blood sugar in check and something like that, but like linking to the strict like muscle building, do you think that it is necessity? Because nowadays it feels like if you are not adding insulin on the plan of your clients, it's always like, why? It's like it's like you must do, because it's like it's you have to. It's like a necessity. You just
Yeah.
it's just fast GH insulin. Have to.
Right, right. I think probably about 20% of my clients, 25% maybe, have insulin in their plans. Most of the time, how I use insulin, and I've always been this way on any podcast you'd ever find me on, I administer insulin and I look at someone's diet and I say, hey, where can I optimize this diet? I do not just say what you had said, hey, I want to use insulin. It's more of where can I use insulin to make what I'm doing better? Whereas you'll have other schools of thought where they'll use Lantus and they'll build the diet around insulin. I don't think that makes sense because I've seen many times where people get to 135, 140 kilos, then they diet down. You're 90 kilos on stage.
Yeah.
I don't. What did you do? All you did was mess with your heart, and all of
Yeah.
these markers, which again are just lowering that ceiling for the duration that you can do this. So I'll use insulin in that sense, fast acting insulin most of the time. Obviously, in some cases, from an insulin sensitivity standpoint, the Humulin R, Lantus, something like that. Do I think it's absolutely 110% needed to build a good physique? No. The reason I think it's helpful to build a better physique because the duration that you could spend eating the food and training and building muscle is going to be limited. It's like a car that could go, you guys are in kilometers, so I don't even know the conversion there. I'm sorry. Let's just say you have a Lamborghini, right? But you can't get out of fourth gear because you have a limiter on what your pancreas can handle because you're asking it to have 100 grams of carbs every single meal. If I throw in a little bit of insulin, now we get to sixth gear, right? So the longer I can extend that phase, I'll do so. So that's how I'll use insulin. But from a pure muscle building standpoint, I guess it's not like testosterone. It's allowing you to build more muscle, allowing your body to not be as stressed. That's the reason. It's very helpful.
Yeah. And the last question is gonna be like those 21st century question. Like we all knows that there are peptides out there
Peptide.
who are getting like popular more and more each days. And do you really think that there are like useful tools to utilize in bodybuilding for those who are really wanted to use every single tools that they can, and probably like don't have like limited budget, because we both knows that those peptides are adding a lot of expensive to that
Yeah,
bodybuilding lifestyle, which is actually not that cheap in the first place.
for sure. I think it's the most expensive hobby, is what I tell people. Um, there are some peptides that are definitely helpful. I think a lot of peptides have been around for a long time. We've had back in the day the ipamorelin, the CJC. I think the best peptide is growth hormone. Okay, so use that if you're trying to build a good physique. Number one, in terms of from an injury standpoint, you have the BPC, the TB, even GHKCU. Those are all things that are going to help for sure improve your recovery time when you're injured. Okay, don't just take it because you're on an off day. Things like NAD plus, glutathione, fantastic. I think you can keep glutathione in. I use it for like fertility protocols. I put glutathione in, very, very helpful, improving motility of our sperm. Um, Other ones such as like what comes to mind? Uh, the GLPs, which have been around for a longer time, but now they're prevalent in bodybuilding, like retatrutide, the GLP-3. It's definitely beneficial to an
Would you
extent. Like, what's that?
would you use it? Because remember that we are talking about the off season. Would you use it, Reda, in the off season setup?
Not most of the time. No, the only thing I have like a client that's like, hey, my calories are 2,500. I'm really hungry. Okay, dude, here you go. Shut up for 2 weeks. Leave me alone. You
Yeah,
know what I'm saying?
but we have to remember that red eye is not only the appetite suppressant. Actually, in the
Right,
lower
glucagon
doses,
and
it
all
might,
that.
yeah,
Yeah,
it might even increase the appetite. But more likely, it's probably going to be lower the inflammation and helping with the lipids
hmm
profile and stuff like that. So I've sometimes used it with my
hmm
guys, like really low amounts, like 0.25 milligrams to maybe a half milligrams weekly, to just keep like check on that. But recently, I've heard that it might potentially hurt the stomachs of some
at
sort
a
to
certain
the degree.
dose.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think GLPs, how they work, a lot of people don't really understand the mechanism behind them. Obviously with the glucagon, that third receptor for GLP,
yeah,
three, which is retatrutide, the benefits, could you use it in the off season? Sure. I think at some point you start to realize, like, okay, I'm a drug addict. I'm just taking every drug to con. So for me, I'm not
because
usually doing that. Do I have a couple clients that do? Sure, I do, but it's only because I know they can afford. It's on the bottom
yeah,
of the totem pole. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you have unlimited funds, you have a sponsor, awesome. We'll throw it in as long as it's not impeding digestion. For some people, when you're eating all that food, you have to remember. Let's just say fats are high, protein's high. You're slowing gastric emptying. Putting in Retta, even if it's only zero point 0.5 milligrams, is still going to slow things down. So sometimes I don't want that, right? And you'll start to see
yeah,
that. So in those cases, when you administer that and you start to notice that, hey, I didn't change anything, and all of a sudden I'm having some issues. Okay, the benefit we were trying and hopeful to get is now not even, it's a detriment. You know what I'm saying? So I won't really use it too much in the off season. I think in prep, which we'll talk about another time, it becomes more useful for some. Um,
yeah.
what else is there? Like, do I use MOTS-C in the off season? No. Sometimes what I'll use, I'm trying to think of all these ones I've used. I'll use SS31 in like sometimes in a health phase. If someone's coming out of a prep, for example, I'll use SS31 for 6 weeks. Um, I think that's helpful. Um, Trying to think, off season, methylene
Maybe
blue, cognitively. What's that? SLU, you said?
sloop.
So SLU, I mean, it's funny. You see how the research changes so quickly, right? When SLU first came out, 250 micrograms. And then people realize it doesn't do anything. So the people that were like, I've had clients, I put 500 micrograms in pre-workout. I've had bigger known clients. Hey, I feel horrible. I can't use this. Do you really? You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah,
you don't feel a goddamn thing. Like it gave you, it's a placebo. So I think from what I see with SLU, I've had one of my good friends and coaches. He had told me he's like me. I won't put it in at, I don't put anything at dosages unless I kind of know what to expect from it. Like I'm the guinea pig first. He's taken up to 100 milligrams, and he's like, I don't really notice much from the SLU. So I don't know how high you've ran it. We could in America we'd have to get the raw powders to do upwards of like 400 milligrams a day, and then it comes again. For me, I look at numbers. It costs that much. I'm just going to use some growth hormone. Okay, I'm going to use other things. Like I'm not going to use all of this money into
yeah.
SLU PP. It doesn't make sense.
I've actually tried 2 milligrams, but I can't really tell if it's working because back in the days when I've used it, I use a lot of things in the same time, so it's really
Right.
hard. The one thing that I was always like worrying about, this is why I use like uracil A or maybe SS31 will be a great choice as well, is that uncoupling of those like mitochondria. You have to be pretty like keep on close eyes on that, because there is a possibility that you're probably gonna feel even less energetic on that
It's very
because of
possible. I think sometimes
overuse
people
of the
think,
mitochondria.
yeah, it's not to cut you off, I'm sorry, but I think sometimes when people are using all these uncouplers and things that boost the mitochondrial output, you can create oxidative stress. If you don't
Yeah,
match the output, you were taking something for the benefits, and now you're not getting the benefits, and you're
yeah,
actually in a worse spot. So, again, do I think they're more important? The ones the ones we were just talking about. I don't think they're more important than all the other stuff for sure.
yeah. Great. So actually, you probably will not lean into peptides that much. You're just like old-fashioned basic stuff is always working, so you probably don't have to worry about those newer things unless someone probably would just wanted to try and, like I said,
Usually,
probably is sponsored and don't care about it expensive.
yeah, like I said, I think for an off-season purpose, there's not many that I'm like, hey, I think there's I think this is a game changer. I don't think there's anything like that for
Yeah.
other people that have the ability and they ask me because again, it's a two-way street coaching. It's not just you're going to do this. It's how are you feeling? Let's try this. If you have an idea, you want to run it by me. This is why I think it won't work. This is what we should consider. If it works, awesome. If it doesn't, I'm not mad because I was on the same page as you. But moving forward, let's just do what I think. Okay. Um,
Yeah.
so for many of the peptides, I'm up with the times because I have a lot of younger athletes that's the fad right now, right? Everyone wants to take the peptides. So to me, I know and I'll utilize them, but it's not for the purpose of you and building all this muscle and becoming the best bodybuilder. I don't think they're needed like 125%. I think there's some that are beneficial when we're injured and all those other cases. But do I think you need MOTS-C in the off season and Retta? No, I think if you're taking growth hormone, you train your balls off, you recover, you have good health markers, you do cardio, you're going to make progress. I don't think that's going to be the reason why you're 10 pounds, 5 kilos heavier all of a sudden.
Yeah. Great. So I think you've already answered all my question when it comes to the off season, because it's basically just like put together all of the basis information. So for those guys who are sticking with us to the end of this podcast, I would just really like to know if there's like maybe codes or anything you would like to promote at that time. Obviously, they can find everything, like, so your all your social media, like coaching inquiries and stuff like that, in the description down below. But maybe there is something that you're working on, maybe secretly, and just wanted to just reach out to those guys who are maybe not here. Anything else, because you're probably going to reach some of the Polish people that's maybe even seeing you for the first time, because
That'd be
I
cool.
don't know, they maybe just are not really following the US like area of the world.
Yeah, no, like I said, I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you. I know we tried to connect last year. It was interesting end to the year, very very busy for me, and
Yeah.
multiple reasons, right? But I don't need to
Congrats.
plug anything.
Congrats on you know what.
Yes, thank you. I don't need to plug anything. My thing is, if anyone ever needs anything, I'll have this year what I'm focusing on other avenues of business is more of the mentoring, building a small community. So I look at what I have now, the one-on-one coaching. I'm pretty full on. I've been full on for a couple of years now. Like I said, I'm very grateful for. So I have coaches under me, and then I'm trying to work with coaches that are trying to improve their skill set or have questions. So if I can help someone, I'm always here. And like I said, I'm the type of person, if I don't genuinely believe I'm the best fit for you based on what you're looking for, I'm not going to waste your time or your money or something like that. I generally want to see people reach success. And if that means, hey, I connected the dots for you, awesome. That's what I'm here for. But, I really appreciate your time today. And I know it's getting a little late for you. So make sure you get in bed.
So if you don't want to promote anything. I'm going to promote your Unwrapped podcast because you and Andrew and recently Chris are doing a great job with that.
Thank you.
And this is something that I would really wanted to copy here in Poland. It's really hard to do that, but I
Thanks.
just wanted to, throughout the maybe last 3 to 4 years, I'm trying to do something similar, bringing up those coaches and just spread out those knowledge, because I do believe that there's a really, even though I've spoke with like probably 15 coaches on this podcast already, there are still guys who are not wanted to believe the simple things. So this is the opportunity to just maybe bringing up those thought process of certain coaches, and that may help some clients to choose coaches a little bit wiser. Maybe they are connecting with you. They're hearing your like approach to those certain things. So I really hope that helps, and I'm really happy that you are doing even a more advanced version of that with guys like Chris and like Andrew, like, because this is something like we missed. We missed that. I think that those good podcasts, like more knowledge podcast based, because we have those entertainment ones, but we need those educated ones a little bit more. So thank you once again, and not taking more of your time. And once again, if anyone stick with us to the end of this podcast, every single links that I can find on Kyle in the internet, you're gonna find in the description down below. Thank you guys for today, and most first of all, I can thank you, Kyle, that you finally taken time to, because like I said, you have like crazy time out there with your podcast and your athletes. So thank you once again.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And thank you, Poland, for tuning in. And my roots are there. So one day, I haven't been there yet, but I hope to explore there, and maybe we can get a training session in, as long as your leg is up to par, and we'll go from there.
Great. So thank you once again, and see you guys later.